I'm going to begin with a thinking question. How many decisions a day do you think the human being makes? You can shout out a few answers. How many decisions a day? I heard 5,000, 10, 100. I was shocked when I heard the answer, too, of common research. 35,000 decisions a day. That's 2,000 decisions, one every hour, and that's one decision every 2 seconds. Look, you already missed the chance to decide something. Now, these aren't 35,000 gigantic decisions, but I want to remind us of the butterfly effect that tells us that something small somewhere else can have a huge impact in a different place. It's called the butterfly effect because the researchers say that by a butterfly flapping its wings, that simple action can cause a raging storm across the world. So this morning I want to explore not just what decisions we make, but rather how we make those decisions. I read a new book called The Right Call. It was by Sally Jenkins, a Washington Post sports journalist. And for 3 decades, she had an up-close and personal view of how the greatest athletes in the world make decisions under pressure. And she explains that you can condition the body, you can condition the mind, you can practice, you can even try to control every aspect of the environment that these decisions are being made about. But when it comes down to it, the prevalent theme of making good decisions under pressure was about failure. She said, if you look at the best championship teams, and now let's take it out of the sports world, but business, any part of your life, the best successful people will be the biggest losers, meaning they failed the most. The scientist Paul C. Nutter teaches that failure allows us to not only look at 20/20 hindsight, but rather understand that there are possibilities ahead from the bad decisions that we make. When I was thinking about this, I thought about the first sermon that I ever heard from Rabbi Wolpe when I was at Sinai Temple for the first time. At that moment, I was simply a significant other. It was called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And Rabbi Wolpe's sermon was about failure. And he said, fail, fail again, fail better. Now this morning we just read of one of the best, greatest leaders, arguably, of the Jewish people, Moses. And under pressure, he had to make what we would think is a small decision. But let's think about Moses, because time and time again, Moses failed. He didn't want to be the leader. In Egypt, let my people go. Took him 10 times. To part the Red Sea, the Midrash tells us it wasn't Moses that really parted the Red Sea, it was Nachshon. When he finally went into the sea and had the water up into his neck, then it parted. Moses failed again, and Moses failed better. But at this moment, again, a small decision, the people are complaining of thirst, the people have complained a lot over these last few weeks. A simple decision, and the decision really is just to follow God's instructions. Talk to the rock and water will come out of it. But he fails again. He fails because God tells him that was the wrong decision. And we can spend a semester here studying why Moses failed at that moment. But I want to give you 2 explanations that the rabbis and the commentaries bring. The first is the Midrash explains that Moses was very cautious of the people that were going to lead him astray. In that instance, the people gather around the rock. They're egging Moses on. And they say, Moses, you performed all these great miracles in the past. This is a small one. Just talk to that rock and let's get going here. But Moses lives with that fear of failure. Later on in the book of Deuteronomy and Devarim, we learn the Torah says explicitly that Caleb and Yehoshua, those will be the only people from that generation that will enter the land of Israel. And since it doesn't exactly mention Moses, Moses thinks, well, I better be careful, because if I do something very small to make the wrong decision, then I'm not going to make it. But I want to bring you Rashi's commentary. Rashi tells us this is what really happened. There were a lot of rocks sitting in front of him. And the rock that Moses was supposed to speak to, it must have been on a hill, it rolled away. And Moses didn't know which rock to speak to. And the people said, well, just talk to anyone. And instead, what does he do? He hits the wrong rock. The water does come out, but it's the wrong decision. And when I thought about Rashi's explanation, I thought about all the decisions that we make in our own lives. Because how many times the decision that we thought we just had it right, it just simply rolls away. And we don't know which rock to go to next. I'm thinking about all the decisions that people have come to Rabbi Guzak and I and the clergy to ask us this year. One of the most insane decisions we've ever been asked. We've never been asked this before. Where should our kid go to college? Like we're college counselors. But these decisions, they're asking us because they understand the butterfly effect. That it may be a small decision right now will lead to something much greater, not only in their life, but in fact the whole world. Because we also know that chasing the wrong rock sometimes paralyzes us from looking from the right one. But the path towards finding the right rock is not logical, but rather it's about faith. Because the faith that if we make the wrong decision in the moment, that we will still be okay, that's okay. Only if the community, the people around us, will be supportive, will be loving, will encourage us that the next decision will be right. Because the act of faith allows us to look inward first and only then act outward. The act of faith allows us to be in a position where we have the emotional security to discover our inner selves. When we heard Guy's story and his beautiful song, the thousands of decisions that you had to make in that moment to be sitting with us today. Acts of faith, supported by love, supported by people and community. We have all faced the fork in the road moments. What place do we live in? What jobs do we take? What people do we talk to? But we also know that some decisions are based on, most of those decisions are based on the inner faith that tells us, or that our heart tells us what to do. You know, after Moses hits the rock, the sentence that we don't focus on says, Ya'an lo ha'emantem bi. God says, Moses, it's not what you did that was the problem, it was how you did it. Meaning it's you didn't have faith in the decision that you were making. You see, the wrong decision was not the action of hitting the rock, but rather the wrong decision that Moses was fearing of that failure. I like to say, no pun intended, that this parsha, this story, is when we hit rock bottom of the Torah. But we also must understand that we have to also make decisions. The Lubavitcher Rebbe teaches that if you don't make any bold decisions, you absolutely lose the opportunity to be accountable for your actions. We just stay paralyzed in thinking about what we should not do or what we should do, and then we don't do anything. Now we know that decisions don't go 100% the way we want all the time. But we also know that we get no grade at all if we don't just step into that water, if we don't look for that rock, if we don't think about what decision we can make. As a child, I used to read Choose Your Own Adventure books, and now we read them with our children. And I love them because you had a choice in the story about where you wanted to go. And the best part about Choose Your Own Adventure books is when I got to the end and I didn't like where I went, I can go back to the beginning and choose the other page and know where I was going. But when I think of those books, I realize that's not real life. We don't get the luxury in our life to go back to the beginning and choose the other adventure. But we do get the luxury of a community of faith, supporting us in every one of those 35,000 decisions a day. The rabbis teach us, Eino sameach behora'ah. Don't take your decision-making lightly. During this past year, we have made decisions as individuals and as community, how Jewish not only we should be, but how Jewish we can be. You all made a decision to come here today, to activate your Jewish soul. We are in constant tension of deciding how Jewish we will be in the public eye. Our amount of decisions of 35,000 a day, we know that they will not diminish. But we also know by activating those Jewish souls, our faith will increase. Remember the butterfly effect? Moses hit the rock. He was not allowed into the promised land. But it activated everybody else around him to realize they cannot depend simply on him. But they had a part to play in the story. That decision allowed the people of Israel to recognize that they too could be those leaders of tomorrow. You see, the decision that prevented Moses from ultimately entering that promised land, it allowed the people to enter the land themselves, to give that gift to their descendants, and ultimately to give it to us, so that we too, in the days and year ahead, can make those decisions that will allow us to not only survive, but like Guy and so many thousands of others, to thrive and to be able to make decisions with each other, good decisions on the road ahead. Shabbat Shalom.